I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. Today is November 20th, 2024. I'm joined by my favorite guys, Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford.
Lots to talk about today, Derek.
Indeed, there is. And Western Standard senior Alberta columnist Cory Morgan.
It's happy to be here to rant.
Yeah. Oh, man. So much good stuff. So much good stuff. We're going to talk. Justin Trudeau says, I did not believe this at first. You guys were with me. We actually had to check the transcript. Didn't believe it. When I saw our own headline, I was like, has one of our reporters tweaked things? No, they did not. He says the families should prioritize climate change, the fight against climate change over food and rent for your family. I didn't even believe our own reporter. I was like, who did that? They're torquing the headlines. That's clickbaity. Nope, it wasn't. My God, we're going to talk about it. Alberta NDP leader Nahid Nenshi has asked the UCP to please give him a seat. So we've talked about this before. The Alberta NDP leader does not appear to be able to convince a member of his caucus in a safe seat to step aside to trigger a by-election for him to get in and become the leader of the opposition in the legislature. So instead, he said that the UCP cabinet minister should resign so he can run. I don't think that's going to happen. But we're going to start with the big news today. Chief Two-Spirit White Powder Randy Bobandy Boissonnault, or perhaps the other Randy, whichever Randy we want to talk about. Randy Boissonnault. He is one of the very few, I think one of only two Liberals, Two Liberals.
The other one's been in trouble too. So.
Yeah. George Chahal is in trouble for being a porch pirate. Randy Bobandy here, though, he is the only Liberal cabinet minister from Alberta. Well, I should say was the only Liberal cabinet minister from Alberta because he just resigned today. This one has been coming for a long time. The guy is neck deep in not just little scandals. These are not Bev would have bought a $20 glass of orange juice and everyone just got their pennies in a twist. These are major corruption level serious allegations to which he has made no effort to clear himself. So just kind of recounting here. Tell me if I've forgotten any, because there's quite a few with him. His company, which is supposed to be in blind trust, he's supposed to have nothing to do with it. Turns out the company that he is the 50% owner of has been getting major juicy contracts from the federal government while he sits around the federal government's cabinet table. And it turned out, it appears very strongly that he allegedly, we'll just try not to get sued here, has had dealings with this company while he is supposed to have it in blind trust. He's supposed to have nothing to do with it. And there are text or email chains discussing, I'll talk to Randy about this. These messages have been acquired. Well, Randy Boissonnault says that was another Randy. That was the other Randy. Well, you'd think if there was another Randy, he'd be really quickly trying to figure out who is other Randy. So he could go to the parliamentary committee investigating and say, here's other Randy. This is the Randy they were talking about. This has been going on for what? Almost a year or something? He has yet to produce other Randy. One gets the impression there might not be an other Randy. It's just Randy. Then we've got, this started developing here. This troublesome company owned by involving the other Randy was listed as indigenously owned, entirely indigenously owned. And if a company's listed as indigenous owned, I guess it gets some subsidies and tax perks and whatnot.
You come up here on the contract list if you're indigenous owned.
Yeah,
they desperately want to.
You're going to get the contracts. You're going to get some subsidies. There's a lot of there's some perks to being listed as an indigenous company, and that's neither here nor there. We can talk about that's a good thing or a bad thing, whatever. But Mr. Randy Boissonnault is as white as pure Colombian cocaine. Speaking of white, pure Colombian cocaine, it now seems that his company has had at least some role to play in some major cocaine smuggling operations.
Well, they shared a mailbox
Allegedly.
anyway. That's
Allegedly.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a bizarre connection, but
it's a bizarre connection. I don't know what was being dropped off and put in there, but it's now touching it. So we've dubbed him here Chief Two Spirits White Powder, but he claims he is also known as a Strong Eagle among the Cree. Maybe that's true or not, but he is not Cree. He is as white as the cocaine that ended up in his mailbox.
But he was in the Liberal Indigenous Caucus.
Yes. The Liberals for a long time listed him as a member of the Liberal Indigenous Caucus. Last time we checked, he doesn't have a drop of Indigenous blood in him. So, and then I think it was just as recently as yesterday, Justin Trudeau was standing by him, stand by your man. Not very usual for Trudeau to actually let go of a guy. Start with you, Corey. You're chomping at the bit, I see. This seems to have been inevitable. There was no way this guy could last. Each one of these was a clearly fireable or resignable offense. What took so long before they saw the inevitable here?
I think if the Liberals had been a strong majority government and he had the room to just turf somebody and absorb it and move on, they would have. But they're down to the threads now. I mean, they're a government that's mailing it in, that's in dire trouble in the polls. Though, I mean, you'd think political wisdom would say get rid of this anvil as fast as you can, but they just weren't eager to lose another caucus member. They've lost some in by-elections. It's just one more.
He didn't resign from the Liberal caucus. He resigned from the Liberal cabinet.
Yeah, but even then, he's got a weak cabinet too, and he's running out of people to put in him. But I mean, the blood was in the water as soon as people smelled it. I mean, this Boissonnault was a very strange character into a lot of troublesome things, and people started digging, and sure enough, they found stuff. There's probably more once you start seeing that much smoke. And even then, though, he hasn't turned out a caucus. He's just out of cabinet. I think they're going to bury him on the back bench and just try to ride this out.
Well, to be fair, I mean, the accusations have been made. They have yet to be proved. So the appropriate thing, not that I am making a defense for Strong Eagle Man.
Strong Eagle Man, yeah.
Strong Eagle Man, yes. Not that I'm making a defense for him, but if somebody if a serving politician is accused of something like this, then the appropriate thing is, yes, you step out of cabinet and you resolve it. And some people have, I can't think of one, but some people, can't think of Liberal anyway, who has actually successfully defended themselves against charges of fraud. But maybe he will. And so you don't actually tie concrete blocks to his feet and drop him over the side. You say, well, you've got some business to attend to, sir. Go attend to it and let us know when you're in the clear. The thing that you can't help, as Corey was talking about, it was just yesterday that the Prime Minister was reported as saying, I have every confidence in Randy. He referred to him as Randy. It was very friendly. And he said, and he's been representing Alberta. And I thought, what exactly is it about Alberta that Mr. Boissonnault represents? There's nothing that I can think of about him that says Alberta.
Yeah, he's okay. The cocaine link to his company, that's an allegation that's yet to be proved. But beyond a shadow of a doubt, we know for a fact he lied about being Indigenous.
Mm-hmm.
He was listed.
We can confidently see. Yeah.
There's nothing to clear his name around there. He did it. It was on the Liberal Party's website, and the thing is, the Liberal Party can't really claim to be innocent of it. He was on the Liberals' website as a member of the Liberal Indigenous Caucus. It was their claim. They backed up that claim. I mean, I don't need a DNA test looking at this guy.
Yeah,
he's a cracker.
That claim was made in 2015, and they proudly put up a poster with 8 other individuals. Here's our Indigenous caucus, and then he quietly disappeared from it.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously somebody at some point said something a little funny about Strong Eagle Man. Maybe we should just but they didn't.
Tasty Eagle, yes.
They didn't think it was funny enough.
White Eagle.
They didn't think it was funny enough to get him off out of cabinet at that point. So obviously the standard for hiring is pretty low.
Well, I mean, they went by the honor system, though. I mean, you can't expect a Liberal government to say, okay, anybody applying or saying they're Indigenous, we're going to make you submit to a DNA test. I mean, they kind of trusted.
You're right about that.
And,
But you would think
where
when
they
had
have
enough
gotten the
evidence
idea.
to
Oh, yeah.
pull them off the poster. That would have
They
taught
realized it later. I mean,
This-
the memes are fantastic.
We're exposed to it.
Pocahontas.
Pocahontas.
Oh,
Was that made up by James, our VP operations, or
might
did
have
he get
been.
it from somewhere
I
else?
don't know. I've seen it around.
Pocahontas was a good one.
But it's like Nigel said, yeah, they smelled the trouble brewing a while ago, but just kind of hoped that it wouldn't surface.
Well, okay, let's talk about the pretendian thing here. So more than we have, I want to get into this because this is fascinating. So you look at, you could look at some people and be like, that guy is probably Indigenous. Some people, you have to look at them maybe one look at Randy Boissonnault, and I'm like, no. Based on last time, I'm saying French. So you see French, Western Canadians, possibly your Métis, but if he was, it'd be pretty far back. So no one sitting in the Liberal website design desk said, took a look at his picture and said, this guy's Indigenous. Where did someone had to tell them. Who would have possibly said this man's Indigenous? It obviously has to come from him, so he was making the pretendian claim. Yet he's claiming this was all just some accident. Yet
The videos are surfing of him showing, at functions as well, identifying as himself as, yes, a standing eagle. Or
strong eagle.
Strong eagle. I mean,
yeah. And then his business is registered as wholly Indigenous. I've never bid for federal contracts, but I've had to go through some dumb paperwork. When we applied for the federal government's media license as a joke to see if we could get it, I had to answer what percentage of the company was Indigenous. I don't think it was any, but I certainly didn't list myself as Indigenous. You have to sign off on those things. You sign it. So he has told the Liberal Party at some point, by simple logical deduction here, he's told the Liberal Party he was Indigenous for at least some time before that was quietly changed. And he told federal bureaucrats for his company bidding on federal contracts, which he's not supposed to have anything to do with when you're a federal cabinet minister, he told them that he was Indigenous. This guy has lied. He's a classic pretendian.
Well, and the thing is, the story kept changing. Originally, he was Indigenous, and then when he was put on the spot, he said, well, actually, I'm sort of an adoptive Cree, and the adoption came from my grandmother. Now, I don't know what the rules say about the Indigenous companies and whether you can be adopted into the tribe and claim to be Indigenous for the purposes of getting a government grant. Maybe that's allowed. But that was the shtick. And then there was another examination of him by a more serious Indigenous person who I think is connected to the program. And although he had more political savvy than to come out and say, this guy is just putting us all on, he made it very clear clear to me anyway, that the adoptive side of the story didn't really hold up.
well, it indicates kind of a bigger problem too. It's almost, fodder for a different discussion, but a lot of government programs, hires and so on, they're desperate to bring in as many Indigenous companies as they can. They have to show success. They have to say, see, look at all of these Indigenous companies that are doing well thanks to our government programs. And unfortunately, there's a lot of socioeconomic challenges for Indigenous people and Indigenous companies, and there's just a shortage of a pool of good qualified ones to fill those roles. So when a government office sees one that looks like it's got its stuff together and will fill the role, they tend to grab them pretty quickly without a lot of scrutiny.
Well, and there's a lot of incentive. I mean, both for individuals and companies to list yourself as Indigenous, both socially and with government. With government, these companies, they're going to get contracts. They might get some subsidies. Individuals, I mean, there's obviously some favorable tax implications if you could be considered Indigenous. But then also socially, I mean, what was, I can't remember her name, she's before my time, but a big Canadian iconic Indigenous artist.
Buffy Sainte-Marie might be.
I mean, as white as Boissonnault. Yeah. She's as white as Boissonnault. Now, I somehow she made herself appear Indigenous looking. I mean, she passed it off since like the 60s or something. before anyone got wise to
It's
this.
frustrating. I mean, we get like Robbie Robertson, who was clearly Indigenous and never rode that. He went on his talent instead, and it didn't matter. He just happened to be Indigenous.
Yeah.
You know?
But you know, there's incentive for people to do this, and it kind of puts lie to that everything is systemic racism, white power. It's like, if it was systemically racist, the white power, we'd all be
they'd all be
natives would
pretending
be
to be white.
it wouldn't be going. I don't know any natives pretending to be white. They might just live like you know, average Canadians, but I don't know anyone lying about their race to be white. But you know, you got all these
Since Michael Jackson, anyway.
Okay, I stand corrected with Michael Jackson, and who knows whatever reason he had. But yeah, this is just a bizarre story. There is no clearing himself here. Maybe on the cocaine one, sure. Who knows? I think it's quite a coincidence that. But
Well, it says a lot about his company too. If you got a large company and so on, typically you'll have a mailing address and not a rented UPS box, is what this was. And apparently, a co-renter was a woman who was busted on coke smuggling twice.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean necessarily that
No.
his company was involved, but boy, that's an odd person to
Why would
share
you
a
share-
mailbox with.
like mailboxes are cheap to rent.
Yeah.
You don't share a rented mailbox when you're a company. That's an odd thing. That's very odd. But I mean, maybe there's some clearing to do there. So maybe he's just.
You know, Derek, I have to say this. We have kind of swallowed the Kool-Aid ourselves because we are talking about this in terms of whether this is a legitimate use of Indigenous identity. Actually, speaking for myself, it shouldn't be a consideration at all. If
Yeah.
you are if you're bidding on a government contract, best one, cheapest, gets the contract. We all know it doesn't always work out that way, but that's the standard. And sort of saying, well, you know, they're having when we're almost justifying this practice of affirmative action, and when we talk about whether he was a legitimate recipient, he never could have been.
The program was illegitimate to begin with.
program was illegitimate in the
DEI
first
shouldn't
place.
be there. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no,
Absolutely right.
100%. I don't care if it's Korean Canadians or Swahili speaking Canadians.
They got a
If you're
good
the-
company.
If you can win if you win the bid, you win the bid. That's just not what we do.
Therefore, ask the honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes to please withdraw that comment. The honourable member.
Speaker, the Minister for Employment has said there's more than one Randy, and I maintain that I was referring to the other Randy as Cocaine Randy.
I spent 4 years in the Alberta Legislature. I think I had some funny moments. I've seen some funny moments. That's the best. That's the best. Playing with the rules. I wasn't referring to that Randy. I was referring to the other Randy. So it kind of brings back to what we were saying at the beginning with other Randy. I guess I can't say matter of factly without 100% chance of not getting sued. But I'm going to say it is highly, highly, highly improbable there is an other Randy. There's just one Randy, and he might go by an Indian name or something. But
I'll tell you what, if there is another Randy, he's keeping his head down. He doesn't want to answer these questions.
I don't blame him in that case.
where's other Randy? He's had lots of time. Actually, and the Conservatives had a great way of resolving this because they can. What's the term? They can summon someone to appear at a committee.
No, subpoena.
Subpoena. Yeah, they can subpoena someone to appear in front of the committee. So the Conservatives moved a motion to subpoena other Randy. He has to show up, knowing what they're doing. That Randy Boissonnault has to show up. Whoever is the Randy in this email has to show up. And of course, the NDP, playing defense with the Conservatives didn't pass. Okay, that's enough of Chief Two Spirits White Powder for now. Okay, so zooming a bit more local into Alberta here, Alberta NDP leader Nahid Nenshi is still not yet the leader of the opposition. Now, when someone becomes the leader of a political party that forms the government, they instantly become the premier as soon as they're sworn. They get sworn in as premier right away. The constitutional convention is that they have to seek a seat in the legislature at a reasonably earliest available opportunity. That means either immediately calling a general election or triggering some by-elections. A lot of people remember Jim Prentice became PC leader. He was sworn in right after as the premier, and then he triggered a series of by-elections that had a whole other, with ripple effects that we're still feeling today. But he had by-elections, he came in. the rules are different for an opposition party leader. You can be the leader of an opposition party, but you're not yet the leader of the opposition in the legislature until you have a seat in the legislature. So now Nenshi's not breaking any constitutional convention here, perhaps breaking political convention. I mean, if it's a small party without a bunch of seats to trigger a by-election, there's not really a huge expectation. You know, if you have 4 seats, you might not trigger a by-election. That's a too high risk a proposal. But the NDP has a lot of seats. They're a pretty big opposition party caucus. They got a lot of MLAs in Calgary, a lot in Edmonton. Yet it appears not a single one of them is willing to resign to let them in. I would have thought at least maybe Rachel Notley. You know, like she's got the safest NDP seat in Alberta, Edmonton, Strathcona, right in the dead center of Edmonton, full of hipsters and weird folks there, bureaucrats, things like that. But he hasn't been able to trigger a by-election. And there's a by-election happening right now in Lethbridge in a relatively reliable NDP seat. Well, we could pass that up saying, oh, okay, he's a big city guy. He wants to run a Calgary. Lethbridge is out of the way. Fine. Well, you got to get one of your people to resign. And we haven't seen it yet. So then I think, maybe I'm mistaken, but I think this is in response to a question from Western Standard reporter Jonathan Bradley, asking him, are you going to get a seat anytime soon? You know, I told him, ask him every time you see him. When are you running? When are you running? And then she says, well, the UCP MLA should resign. Now, to be fair, I think he was being a bit tongue-in-cheek. Like, he doesn't expect it to happen. But this strikes me, Corey, as a classic kind of Nenshi arrogance that, the government should just, plow the way for him to get into the legislature. One of his people shouldn't have to resign, as we've done for, 400 years of Westminster tradition.
Well, I think some of it, too, is that it is getting under his skin. You know, Jonathan asked the question he really didn't want to touch. It's already a weak position to be in. It's almost, a little humiliating. You're standing in the atrium begging for coverage. You're down there when you should be getting those quotes in the legislature and hammering on things. So I think he tried for something he thought would be one of those quotable things. And then she's a bright guy. He can get some good ones out now and then, but it just kind of fell flat. He took the wrong tack with it. And I think it's an indication, though, of just how much it is actually bugging him when it got to his composure rather than giving a good answer on it.
Well, I guess it was a quotable moment. And here we are talking about
not a good quotable moment.
You
get the ones you want and the ones you don't.
That's the thing. I mean, anybody who is not following politics closely and who stumbles across this is going to say, well, that's kind of a dumb thing to say. Why on earth would the government ask one of their people to step aside so the opposition, the leader, can come in? That doesn't make any sense. And not making any sense is not a good look if you are the opposition leader. And now they've also, as you mentioned just a moment ago, they've now called the Lethbridge by-election. So the answer will be, there's an open seat. Go for it, Mr. Nenshi. And we know he doesn't want to, and he's probably got reasonably good reasons for not wanting to, not the least of which is that it's not actually a slam dunk for him.
Oh, it's not a safe NDP seat, but it's pretty safe.
Yeah. But it would be embarrassing. Like, Don Getty lost after he won his leadership in trying to get a seat.
Well, he lost in a general election.
Yeah, but they still had to carve out up in Stettler for him. It was an embarrassment. But when you're the party in power, you can,
up there.
you can pull it off. But he doesn't have that strength. If he lost a by-election down south, it would be such a blow to him. It would be very difficult to recover from, even as much as he's getting weakened by his outside status right now.
I don't hold it against them not running Lethbridge, because the leader of a party should generally run in a safe seat. Danielle Smith, remember, did not run in Calgary Elbow when Calgary Elbow was open, because that was not a safe seat. That would have been a stupid thing for her to do. The NDP won it in the general election. They very well could have won it in that by-election that torpedoed her premiership outside the gate. So now I think Nenshi actually would have had a good chance of winning Lethbridge West.
Yeah,
not
good enough, though.
So
but it's also
you're betraying a generosity of spirit there that most people probably wouldn't. You're right. Of course it would. Although it was held by the NDP part. So
They keep their caucus discussions, tight there. We don't get the leaks like we used to. But I just wonder about how insecure he's feeling. Like, he appointed Christina Gray as the official opposition leader in there.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, I don't want to nog Ms. Gray that she's won her seat and so on, but you get stronger MLAs and weaker ones for public persona and being there. She's
know
one
her
of the
very
weaker
well,
ones. And it just tells me he doesn't want to be outshone by somebody in the legislature till he can get there.
I know her quite well.
Yeah.
Actually, when I was chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, it's the one committee that the opposition chairs, not the government, and she was the co-chair. So she had a majority, but I got to be chair. So it's a weird balancing dynamic.
Yeah.
She's a smart, capable lady, but I mean, I wouldn't put her on the short list of
That's what I mean. I'm not trying to insult her
But
abilities. I'm just saying she's not one of the front and center. Let's make sure the
I think
party
that's
is really in
intentional.
the headlines. And
Yeah.
I do think it's intentional. He doesn't want the face of the party to become somebody else.
I just got a devious idea.
Uh-oh.
And if someone in the UCP caucus or Premier's office is watching right now, this crazy idea might actually be worth it. I think a UCP MLA should resign to let him run. Now, you do it the most conservative seat in Calgary. Do it in like the deep southeast or southwest. Do it in the deep south of the city. You wanted a Calgary by-election from a resigning UCP MLA? Let's go. And that MLA could run in their own by-election. They could run in their own by-election, reclaim their seat. They could do it over the Christmas break so they're not missing the legislature. Call them on it. Because if the leader of a party loses a by-election called for them, they're done.
Well,
They're done.
I'm not sure how much voters might react to that political posturing, but
it's games.
From our point of view,
but Nenshi's the one who called for it.
True.
It's
Careful what you
Nenshi
wish
who
for.
said it. Remember when Stockwell Day, dared Jean Chrétien to call an early election? He didn't really want him to, but he dared him to. But then Chrétien was like, "Okay,"
You asked for it.
caught him with his pants down. I mean, if your opponent asks you to do something, but they don't want you to do it, you should do that thing. I think the UCP should give Nenshi a by-election in like southwest or southeast Calgary.
Run against MacIver or something.
Yeah.
meanwhile, Christina Gray for leader. Maybe a commercial opportunity there.
This popped into my head as kind of a crazy, silly thing, but I don't think it's actually the craziest thing. I think the UCP should take him up on the challenge. Call a by-election.
Well,
Give them a conservative seat to run it.
I know a couple of their members tend to watch our shows every now and then, so
Yeah.
we'll see if that goes around.
Let's see. Sorry for you guys in South Calgary MLAs if
about
you're
it.
watching, but I think you've got an opportunity to make a bit of a splash. Okay, I'll start with you, Nigel. How long can Nenshi stay out of the legislature? He's been the NDP leader since, what was it? Was it May?
May or June, early summer anyway.
Yeah, early summer.
Time for the Stampede circuit.
Yeah. I mean, he won that leadership in a fantastic fashion.
85%, I believe it
Yes.
was.
He won with Kim Jong-il level support. And it wasn't a leadership review. That was a leadership vote, which is harder than a leadership review. He won it handedly. So he's got a rock solid mandate to lead that party, much more solid than I thought you'd get. But how long? I don't think he's at risk with the caucus and the party here because he won it so overwhelmingly. But with the public, but does the public care? They just know that there's an NDP leader. No one actually watches question period except for dorks around our newsroom. Sorry, guys, but like no one watches this stuff. Does the public care?
We watched.
How long does he have?
Listen.
Fair enough. But how long does he have?
To be honest, Derek, I would have thought that he was at that point now, or maybe last month, when if you haven't already got yourself into the legislature, people have got to seriously ask, well, what's the matter with you? It's a curious thing that there is not one of those NDP MLAs who has got enough dedication to the party to actually say, well, I will give up my seat so that you can run, sir. That's interesting. There isn't the level of commitment. And the only thing that I think permits him to get away with it is that eyes are so focused on Danielle Smith and on what the government is doing, and it has been doing a lot, that nobody's really paying very much attention to the NDP. If they were paying more Like if the NDP mattered more, then the fact that he's still outside the legislature would matter more. So the answer to your question is yes, I think he's actually past the point, but he can probably get away with it for another 6 months. Because why? Who's asking?
Well, the legacy media is playing the part of the official opposition quite effectively,
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah.
Well, Corey, you were involved in the early Wild Rose Party, and Danielle Smith did not have a seat, but that was a radically different circumstance.
Yeah.
The Wild Rose began after the previous election, 2008, with 0 seats, I think. Oh no,
We had one with Paul Hinman.
Nope, that was the
and it was
by-election.
in and out, and then the Calgary Glenmore just before Premier Smith won the leadership.
Paul Hinman lost his
Hinman-
seat in 2008.
Yeah, and then he
So
won Glenmore.
So Wild Rose had 0 seats.
Yeah.
Then Hinman won a by-election in Glenmore, and then 3 other PCMLAs became.
They didn't cross until Smith became leader.
Yes.
So that was
So,
in that.
so she became leader. By the time she settled in the leader's office, the Wild Rose was up to 4 seats in the House. The NDP has got what, 30 something, high 30s.
Something like that.
a lot.
Yeah, they're in there.
They're
30 something.
close to 40-ish
Yeah,
seats.
they can spare one.
They're in the high 30s. They've got a lot. They're an established party. But Smith still led the party from outside the legislature. And it may have been a small party, but by the time they got close to the election, it was the clear contender. It was not the NDP. It was not the Liberal.
It was the second
longest-
party.
Yeah, they were the small party outside the legislature coming in. But she led the party pretty successfully from outside the legislature for roughly 3 years. She wasn't expected to play the role of official opposition leader in the House. But do people really care? So I'm starting to wonder, like, yes, this is unusual. This is showing signs that, he may have won the party membership over, but perhaps the caucus probably not going to revolt against them, but no one's putting their hand up to take one for the team. But does it really matter? Is he actually going to be fine going the whole 4 years outside the House?
Well, he could pull it off for 3. I think he's got to get at least 1 year in there before the next election. I mean, this would be hard on him to continue outside of it, but he could get through it. He did get a strong mandate from members. They aren't the types of caucuses that tend to revolt, even if they don't seem to support him enough to want to have anybody fall on the sword for him. But he's going to need 1 year in that legislature. People still want to see him holding Premier Smith to account. They want to see him fire a question. Even if your average viewer doesn't watch that, you kind of expect the odd clip over the course of time. You want to see the picture of him in the legislature, something. And he's just not painting that picture of a government in waiting if he can't get himself into the legislature. So he's got time, but it's ticking and it's annoying him. And he's going to get all the weaker the longer it takes.
You got to kind of wonder about the water cooler conversation within the NDP caucus. Well, you going to resign and give him? No, do that. I worked hard for this.
Well, he's still considered an outsider by the caucus. I mean, he brought in a lot of new members. Fantastic. Great work. Incredible ground campaign. But that doesn't mean he endeared himself to the others. In fact, it feels more like he kind of butted into their little club.
So there's an obvious seat for him here. And he opened himself up to this. It wouldn't have been an issue if he said, I want a Calgary seat. But he said he wants a Calgary or Edmonton seat. This is what he said because why he's not running in Lethbridge West. And I think among the New Democrats, even among some conservatives, there's a bit of snobbishness that senior ministers, leader of the party, they have a Calgary or an Edmonton seat. They're a bit more prestigious than having something way out in the sticks in Lethbridge. I mean, it's surrounded by blue, for God's sakes. It's a little orange island. It's not prestigious. Also, and to be fair to him, he's not a Lethbridge guy. And it's a long ways to go if you're going to actually do some constituency work. It's a ways to go. It's the opposite way from Edmonton. And it's not really where other seats are that the NDP is very likely to win. But he opened himself up when he said Calgary or Edmonton. And that raises the question of former leader and premier Rachel Notley. She has the safest New Democrat seat in Alberta. You could run a goat with an orange sign and it's going to win that seat. He has a 100% chance of winning that seat if there's a by-election. 100%. Maybe Rachel Notley will tire of it before the end of the 4 years, but why has Rachel Notley not stepped aside? It's a pretty traditional thing for the outgoing leader to offer their seat to the incoming leader. It's pretty usual.
Good question.
Oh, and for the record, Jason Kenney did not for Danielle Smith. He resigned his seat like a week before the writ dropped. I mean, he never sat in the legislature once Danielle Smith won, but he didn't resign his seat until the very end, so he could kind of say, I'm resigning my seat. But it was way too late. Oh, no, he didn't do it before the red drop. He resigned his seat like days after she called the by-election in Brooks Medicine Hat for her to run,
Well, and Kenny,
denying her the Calgary.
Kenny had more reason to be bitter.
Yes.
Notley did resign as leader on her own, not pushed out like Kenny was.
Yeah.
But it just does show that she doesn't feel like shortening her final term in there for the sake of Nenshi.
Yeah.
She's drawing a paycheck.
Yeah.
And in the absence of a pension scheme, I guess that keep the job going a little longer. Might meet some personal objectives.
A little more severance. I guess there's
There is no more.
Did they get rid of that too?
They got rid of that.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
no, maybe she just enjoys being an MLA.
Former leaders don't tend to do much around when they're at the end of their career like this. Like Andrew Scheer's got a second lease on life. Stockwell Day had a second lease on life. Joe Clark did. But I don't think she's doing that. I don't think she's planning on sticking around to be the Minister of Finance for Premier Nenshi. I think she's done.
Yeah.
But she's not resigned yet. Curious.
Yeah.
I don't think she was terribly thrilled about Nenshi winning because he's not as old school. He's not old school NDP. He's more of a new NDP.
Yeah.
So
We'll see. As Nigel said, it'd be nice to get her on their water cooler because I'm sure there's some interesting discussions.
okay. With the remaining time we got left, let's talk about Trudeau's new home finance recommendations for Canadian families. So Trudeau is down in South America for some confab. I think it may have been at the G20 where he said this.
It was indeed G20 summit in
G20,
Brazil.
You've got the quotes?
Global. Yeah, let me.
Why don't you just read it so I don't
read it out here. This from the Western Standard. Trudeau speaking at a global citizen conference at the G20 summit in Brazil touted his government's carbon tax and said more countries need to take climate change more seriously. And here is the direct quote. It's really, really easy to say, okay, let's put climate change as a slightly lower priority when families are worried about how to pay the rent this month and how to buy groceries for the kids, said Trudeau. We can't do that around climate change.
Wow.
So don't pay the rent. Just suck up the extra cost that is incurred by this wretched carbon tax and every other government policy that has contributed to inflation and a rapidly rising cost of living. The man is insane.
Easy to say when you're born into wealth and privilege that the government pays for your housing and the government pays for all of your food and your family's food. Easy to say from that perch. Nigel, I don't think he just hears himself sometimes. He's just living on another planet from the average Canadian who does have to worry about paying rent or your mortgage, who does have to worry about putting food on the table, who's actually had to work in a job outside of the government at some point in their life.
No, I think when he got back to Ottawa, there might have been a couple of people within the Prime Minister's office who said, "Sir, did you really have to say that?"
I don't know if anybody says that to him anymore.
Well,
I don't think they do.
Maybe Katie Telford. I wouldn't be an elected member, but some of the senior heads with whom he must confer from time to time about strategies. Well, that wasn't really a winning comment. We can play it down, but you can bet that that's going to be like bad budgets that balance themselves and not worrying yourself about monetary policy is going to come back, sir.
Cory, this I try, no matter how crazy and out there someone sounds, I try to get in their head, however scary a place that is. I try to understand why he would say something like this. And what makes sense to me is that among, the urban, like kind of Laurentian progressive elite, climate change, global warming is the most important thing in the world. That it is on par with, fighting a world war for your very survival as a nation, as a people. If you lose that, you will cease to exist. And from that perspective, if you truly believe that this is that level of danger and crisis, then he's actually quite reasonable. I mean, in wartime, extreme wars, we ration food. We have wages and price controls. So, I mean, from that perspective, it's actually an entirely reasonable situation if the world will end if we don't, have carbon tax.
I think there's ideology of that with him believing that there's climate change, but I think it's more selfish than that when it gets down to the basis of it, that he wants his legacy, though, to be the one who staved off climate change through his initiatives, through the carbon tax. And he is kind of realizing that people are rejecting it. It is failing. People do realize that the carbon tax is costing them money. And he's worried about his legacy. So again, in his narcissistic world, though, it's, you guys have to take one for the team. You're being selfish. We have to save the world. You have to tighten your belts. Your kids need to eat a little bit less. You need a little more modest of a home because it's so important for climate change. But I still think in the back of that strange place that's his head, it's also, this is important for my legacy. And that's, I think, unfortunately, the real bottom line of this. And it's ugly. It's really ugly.
The legacy is actually produced 300 tons of carbon, apparently.
Just going there.
I don't know who calculates these things, but,
I burn more carbon going there than I do in a year.
Yeah, exactly.
And I burn a lot of carbon.
This is not to mention the trips to Tofino. So, it's
I don't know,
it shows that privilege too, though. I said only a person who never really has lost sleep wondering how to pay the rent, or how you're going to get better clothes for the kids for the school year, or fill the car up to get to work. He's never had to deal with any of that, so it's pretty easy to flippantly say this is the sort of thing you can stop worrying about because climate change is a bigger deal. He's just disconnected from reality.
Okay, we're going to put a pin in that there and go to our parting shots. Let's start with Nigel's.
Yes, well, this one will appeal to you, Derek. There was a big gangland shootout in Toronto. I think it was Monday of last week. And there were 100 shots fired, 23 people arrested. And
they weren't very good shots. No one got
killed. Obviously, nobody took the firearms course on safe handling, but
they didn't go to shooting edge in Calgary.
They certainly don't last for the shooting edge. But anyway, here's the thing: not one of the handguns involved in all of that had ever been legally owned in Canada. They've all been brought in from the United States, smuggled in. And yet the Trudeau Liberals are still offering the confiscation of guns, long guns, mark you, as the solution to gun crime in Toronto.
Oh, and banning of handguns.
And banning of handguns, well, that would be logical, except...
No, they did ban handgun sales.
Yeah, but that would seem to address the handgun aspect of this, but in the end...
Not a single one of them was from Canada.
Not a single one of them was ever... in these people, again, I say it again, they're insane.
Cory.
Well, to get in on the Trudeau pile-on with insanity, Northvolt, some people might remember it, they announced with great fanfare that it was going to invest in Quebec and build a big battery plant and employ thousands of Quebecers and bring the EV revolution. Well, $4.3 billion in subsidies, and it sounds like possibly billions in pension funds have gone into this. Nothing's been built. They're based in Sweden, and it sounds like the company's on the brink of bankruptcy now. So those dollars could be totally flushed, not a single job created. And let's not forget, that's just a few billion out of the 50 billion he's dumped into these battery plants, and they aren't bearing fruit. They're going broke. So I got a feeling this is just the first domino in a bunch to go down.
And when you said pension funds, that's CPP,
yes.
Canada Pension Plan. Oh no, it would be so terrible if Alberta ran its own pension plan, because Ottawa does it so responsibly, doesn't it? Okay. My parting shot.
That's not a bad one right there, actually.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Aftershock.
AMCO, the Alberta Investment Management Corporation. It manages Heritage Fund, all stuff like that. The province was, I got to give the CBC some grudging credit here on a great headline. I said, Ready AMCO fired. The province, the Smith government fired the entire board. They seem to be pretty obsessively into some DEI stuff. I'm not sure what other reasons they had for here, but they nuked the whole thing. And former Prime Minister Stephen Harper has been made, I think, what's the role? Chairman?
Yeah, he's
chairman of the board.
I gather he's doing it for $1 a year.
That's a bargain,
yeah,
if he does well. He's Stephen Harper. We were chatting about this offline. He's not an investment manager. He's not a finance expert. He's got training as an economist, but that's macroeconomics. It's different than investment management. But the man knows how to run an organization, and he wasn't happy with everything he did as prime minister, but he ran a competent-ish government. And competent-ish is extremely competent by the standards of any government. So, we'll see where that goes. But, doing on a dollar, hard for the opposition to criticize that. But, Elon Musk and his partner running Doge in the United States, Nancy Pelosi saying, "Oh, this is so inefficient." They're doing it for two guys doing one job. They said, "Yeah, well, we're doing it for $0." So,
yeah,
eat that.
You bet.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining on the pipeline today. And thank all of you for joining us here on the pipeline. Remember, the Western Standard is one of the very last independent media left in Canada that refused to take Justin Trudeau's big federal media government bailout. We don't take tax dollars to fund what we're doing, and we're one of the very few left who don't. That means we need your support to continue to produce what we do, to produce independent and fearless news for Westerners. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, please go to westernstandard.news right now. Click on subscribe. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year, and you'll get access past the paywall to all of our content. We've got a big newsroom here with more reporters than almost any other paper left in the country at this point. Only CBC's got more than us, I think, at this point. We're going strong, expanding in British Columbia and Saskatchewan as well. And even if you poor Eastern bastards want to come along for the ride, I think you're going to enjoy what you get. Thank you very much for joining us here today, and God bless.